Hi, thanks for clicking on this video. We're here at Trinity Wesleyan Church so that we can unleash hope to those around us, and that includes you. So thank you for being a part of what's going on in our church, even through technology. We hope that this video is a blessing to you, and at the end, you're going to see some next steps and ways that you can get involved even after this video is done.
You can be rich, but if you're without God, what do you have? You have nothing. The Apostle Paul wrote to Timothy and said, instruct those that are rich in this world's goods, not to be proud. Don't fix your hopes on the uncertain things that money can buy. Fix your hope on God. Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Put God first. God will take care of the rest. But if you put money and pleasure and power first, you're going to be deceived. You're going to come up empty. You're going to come up short-handed.
I know who you are. I know you. I know you and I understand you. And here's how I know that I know you is because I know the human condition. That we are all fallen people. We've all messed up. We are all broken people. Romans 3:23, Paul writes and he says, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. I know you because I know the state of the world. I know you because I'm also human. I know you and I know the human condition because I know myself. Just because I'm a pastor doesn't mean that I don't sin. I sin less than I did last year. I sin less than I did 10 years ago. I sin less than I did 20 years ago. I know you and I know humanity. I don't know anyone who looks back and they're like, man, I'm so glad I gained these extra 40 pounds. I don't know anyone who's like, I'm going to set out, I'm going to plan to be, to not fit my clothes, to feel bad. I'm going to plan to do that. I don't know anyone that's like, I'm going to spend a bunch of money, file bankruptcy. I don't know anyone who says, I want to be hooked onto porn. I don't know anyone who says, I want to wreck my marriage. I don't know anyone who chooses to do things that are hurtful in our lives. Now, no one plans to do stupid things. But we do those things and we hide and then we lie about those things and then we lie more about those things. And then you lose trust in your family and friends and you get pushed away because of what you do. The chances are good that you never plan to wreck your life. Anybody who looks back and says, I never thought I would be in this place. You think about people who are in prison. You think about people who have done things and even not got caught. They never planned to be in those situations. People never planned to be an alcoholic or a drug dealer or addicted to drugs. But the problem is you don't plan not to as well too. We don't plan to mess up our life, but we also don't not plan to mess up our life. It's just kind of like whatever happens, happens. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the power of our decisions. The quality of our decisions determines the quality of your life. You can make decisions or you can let decisions just happen. And just because you made decisions doesn't mean that they're going to be good for you. If you're making good decisions, you're probably going to have a better quality of life than people who just make decisions in general. The quality of your decisions determines the quality of your life, what you're going to have. We make our decisions, but then our decisions make us. Our decisions make us. We are not great decision makers when it comes down to it. We are not good at making decisions. Most people are not where they want to be in life. And so that's why we're talking about this series, is the power of pre-deciding and figuring out what you want to do in life and pre-deciding that I'm going to do what's going to be best for my life and best for my spiritual life. That if I pre-decide that I'm going to do this in the beginning It's a lot easier to make decisions that have a better quality so that our life is of better quality as well, too. When you pre-decide, it's when you're faced with whatever you're going through, whatever struggle, temptation, sin, whatever you're going through. When I'm faced with fill in the blank, whatever you're going through, when I'm faced with this situation, I have pre-decided to fill in the blank. When I'm faced with something that is a temptation, I have already pre-decided that's not going to be my story. When I'm faced with going back into old sins, I've already pre-decided that that's not what I'm going to do. I've pre-decided that. Your decisions won't be based on what feels good in the moment, but who you want to be for the rest of your life. Those quality decisions to have the quality of life that you're looking for, it's not going to be based on what feels good in the moment. What feels good in the moment, not exercising, eating a lot, spending a lot of money, but it's who you want to be for the rest of your life. Who do you want to be for the rest of your life? If you pre-decide who you're going to be and you put that into the forefront of your mind, it's going to help you have a better quality of life. When our values are clear, when we understand what we value as a person, your decisions are going to be a lot easier. For us as Christians, if we go into this and say, what I value is Jesus and the Holy Spirit and His will for my life, it makes your decisions a lot easier because it's not if I'm going to sin or not, because you've already pre-decided that my value is following Jesus. When you follow Jesus, your decisions are easier because it's not, am I going to do good or bad, but am I going to follow God or not? Have you ever given into temptation? And when you have, I can rest assured that you regret it. When you give into that temptation, a couple minutes later, a couple days later, you look at it and you're like, oh, again? Like, I can't believe I did this again. Now, why do we do that? Why do we fall into those things that we don't want to do? It's because we weren't ready for it. Scripture says in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, it says, be on your guard. Stand firm in the faith. Be courageous. Be strong. Paul says that in 1 Corinthians. And Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 26. It says, watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. In your head, you got this idea that I can do this, but when it comes down to it, the flesh is weak. It's easier said than done. So we prepare because we're not ready. So when we're ready, we're going to be on guard. And Paul says to be on your guard, watch and pray, stand firm in the faith. Watch and pray. Watch and pray. Why do we need to be ready? Here's the first reason. The devil is coming for you. The devil is going to be coming for you. His mission is to bring as many people to hell as possible. And many Christians, I would say all Christians, are susceptible to attacks from Satan because he's not worried about those who don't follow God because they're already not following God. But if he can get you and attack you and get you to be tempted and fall into sin, he can bring other people with him. In 2 Corinthians, Paul writes to the second letter that he writes to the church of Corinth. He says, I wrote to you so that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. What does that tell us? I wrote to you so that Satan will not outsmart us, for we are familiar with his evil schemes. Number one, that shows us that we have to become familiar with his evil schemes. We have to understand what Satan is trying to do, how he's trying to trick us, because he's tricky. He's a slippery little guy, and he wants to trick you and weave himself into your life so it feels like you're following God, but you're not following God. How do you become familiar with something? You think about like Serial killers. Everybody loves to watch serial killers, watch these documentaries. I don't, but most of the nation does right now. When a serial killer is trying to figure out his next victim, it's not willy-nilly. He knows what he's going to do next. He knows why he's going to do it. He knows the person, when they're going to come, when they're going to leave. He knows exactly where they work, what time they get home, what time they leave, when are they alone, when are they doing all these things. And you go into a serial killer's room, and it's where they have all these papers up, and they have all these times and maps and all these, the red yarn that is tied to different things, and they have all these connection points. And it's like, oh my gosh, you walk into a serial killer's room, you're like, they are crazy. But on the other side, you think of the person trying to catch the serial killer. You got the detectives that are also doing the same thing. What is this guy going to do? What's he going to do next? How can I make sure this doesn't happen? So we have to become familiar with the evil schemes so that we know how to best be protected from that. Those detectives are studying, and sometimes they're studying for years and years, and a lot of TV shows come back to, it's that one that got away, and I gotta figure out what's going on. So that's number one. We have to become familiar. Number two, Satan will not outsmart us as Christians. It's the same verse that we tell our girls when they're afraid. I took Ava to the dentist this past week. She had to get a filling. And we go into this dental procedure. In the morning when she woke up, we told her about that she had to go to the dentist. And she was crying when she left the house. And then when I went to go pick her up from Harrington, where Jen was babysitting, she was hiding from me because she didn't want me to take her to the dentist. So we tell our girls when they're afraid. We tell our girls when they're anxious. We tell our girls when they don't want to be embarrassed, like trying something new, like gymnastics or dance. Like they're afraid to try something new and be embarrassed because they're in front of people. And so we tell our girls this. It's 2 Timothy, the first chapter, verse 7. It says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind." The second thing that the scripture shows us is that we will not be outsmarted by Satan. We will not be outsmarted because when you follow God, you're following the one who is all-knowing. You're not going to be outsmarted when you're following the one who created the world. You're not going to be outsmarted because you're following the one who understands Satan the most. But on the other side, Satan will not outsmart us because Satan is not all-knowing. Satan only knows what's happening in the present and the past, and he can't tell the future. He only tricks us. He tries to sway us so that in the end that we follow him instead of following God. But the only future that Satan knows is that he loses in the end. We will not be outsmarted when we are following God. So the second reason why we need to be on guard and be ready is you're not as strong as you think you are. Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians, he says, "So if you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall. You are not as strong as you think." If you think you're standing firm, if you think you're strong, if you think I got this on my own, I don't need Jesus, I don't need the Holy Spirit. If you think you're standing firm, be careful that you don't fall because you're up on your high horse. Be careful that you don't fall because you think you can't be attacked and that you're strong enough to handle it. You are not as strong as you think you are. Studies show that people overestimate their ability to resist temptation. It's called restraint bias. You think that you can resist something more than you actually can. Anybody heard of Pringles? Once you pop, you just can't stop. You think you can handle temptation. Oh, I could just have one of those Pringles. I could have one of those Pringles. You're like, I'm fine. And then 10 minutes later, you're like, oh man, these Pringles can, it's empty. This Pringle can is empty. Once you pop, you just can't stop. It's the restraint bias. We think that we can resist more than we can. For me, it's chilies, chips, and queso. Like, if you think about it, every single 4 chips that you eat, they make a circle. And they make a circle. You think about that, that's 1 tortilla. I don't know how many tortillas I had a couple nights ago, but it was so much. We got 1 bowl, and then we got another, and we ate about half of that. And their bowls are big. They're big bowls of chips. And then we took some home to go because we didn't finish all the queso. So why overestimate how we can resist temptation? Why do we overestimate resisting temptation? Resisting temptation takes a ton of energy. It takes a ton of energy. If it's sin, if it's eating better, if it's not eating those things, not drinking pop, not having as much coffee, not gossiping as much, we overestimate. But resisting temptation takes a lot of energy. And it's that part of our brain that controls willpower that starts to wear out when you keep going at it and you keep going at it. You fight temptation to eat good and it gets harder to resist overeating. You're just like, oh, I deserve it. I need every single thing. There's a reason that diets don't work. It's because people don't have enough discipline and we get tired of making good decisions. You spend your energy on not getting mad at the kids. I did great not getting mad at the kids. How many times I get mad at my wife? How many times I get mad at my friends or family? You blow up on your spouse and you just get tired. You're just like, I'm being better to my kids. Stop bothering me. You think you have self-control. You think you have willpower, but it's a limited resource. The more you use, the less you have. The devil is going to be coming for you, and you're not as strong as you think you are. There's one time I prayed for patience. I did say one time. And how you get patience, you don't just receive patience like, oh, thank you, like Amazon Prime. Like, I just received my month of patience here. I need to re-up it next month. You don't just receive patience, but God gives you time to practice patience. God gives you events to practice patience. And I'm working on patience, and my days went horrible. I was getting frustrated. There was more traffic than normal. Every single thing just seemed to keep going wrong. One of my little things that I can't handle is when I have little things that I'm trying to get in and they don't work like they're supposed to, like when I'm putting together furniture or something. Like, it should work, but I got these big fingers and I'm trying to get it up and I can't get it where it needs to go. And then eventually I told God, I said, let's work on patience in a couple years. I'm not ready for patience. This isn't something I can work on right now. Willpower is a limited resource. For now, we'll talk about a little bit more later. But there's 3 keys to fight temptation. You have to pre-decide that I'm going to fight temptation, that I'm actively going to fight. Because if you don't actively fight against it, you're also not trying that hard to fight against it. Just kind of, if it comes or whatever, like, the temptation will be there. And if you don't pre-decide to do it, it's going to be a lot harder when it comes into your life. The first thing you can do to fight temptation is, number 1, move the line. Imagine a piece of tape on the ground. And you are on one side, and then there's the tape, and then the other side. You think about this. A lot of people, how they focus on sin and how they focus on things that are not good for them is, how close to this line can I get without stepping over the line? How close can I get to this line without sinning? How close can I get to the line without doing something stupid or doing something dumb or getting in trouble? How much can I speed without getting a speeding ticket? We try to move the line. When Jen and I were dating, it became, how close can we go without? Like, Jen and I, we didn't have sex before marriage, but we're close at points. And there was points that we had to stop kissing for months at a time during our dating and engagement so that we didn't have sex before marriage. And it's not how close can I get, but how far can I stay away from the line. You got to move the line. You got to move away from the line so that you're not how close can I get, but how far away can I stay and how close can I be to God. We got to move our mindset to where we think the line is, because in the moment, you're going to go over that line. If you're already butting up to the line, you're going to go over when you get close. We don't do this in other areas of life. You're driving and you're going through and you're like, I wonder how close I can get to not sideswiping somebody's car. I wonder how close I can get to not getting a ticket going through the red light cameras in Dover. I wonder how little I can do to not lose my job. I wonder how much I can spend down in my bank account so that I don't overdraft. You got to change in your mind where the line actually is. You have to pre-decide that I'm putting distance between me and temptation. I'm going to move where that line is, so when I know I'm going to get to that point, I am so far away from where sin actually is. Like, I used to spend down to almost 0 cents every single week. I'd get paid like, oh, like I got $10. I'd think in my head, like I can get $9.50 some cents worth of food at McDonald's. Like I got enough money. And this happened so much where I had to give Jen my debit card. Like we were just dating at this point, and luckily I trusted her a lot. And I had to ask Jen to for anything that I spent. Anything that I spent, I had to ask Jen and get my card from her, and she lived across campus from me, so it was difficult to spend money. You have to pre-decide what your limit is and put yourself between, and put distance between yourself and that temptation. If you're spending hours and hours on social media every day, you got to pre-decide what that time limit might be. And if you need help with that, I can show you some apps that can help you stay true to that time limit that you need. If you think that you're going to get drunk and you're going to go hook up with people, then don't go clubbing. That's not something that is good for us if we're trying not to do that and try not to fall into temptation. Or if you think that, like, you know what, when I'm around these people, I start to gossip and I love to hear the drama. If you find yourself in that situation, say, even if they're Christians, I can't hang out with you because when I'm around you, I start to sin. And I'm trying to get closer to God rather than closer to you. You're creating barriers between yourself and sin. And a lot of times people look in and say, oh, all these rules in Christianity. There's so many things I can't do. But that's the opposite. When you have these things that help you, you are actually freed by being able to live within the will that God has called you to, where you're going to have the best quality of life that you can ever have anywhere else. Like, we can have so much fun as Christians, and some Christians get a little weird, a little quirky when they try to have fun, but you can have so much fun within the will of God and enjoy life and have joy in your life and have good people around you that are going to build each other up. And it doesn't come with all this baggage of all this sin from these other people. So you have to pre-decide, you have to move that line and figure out where that line is and move it further away from where you ever thought it needed to be. In Psalm 16, it says, "The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance." The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. Surely I have a delightful inheritance. That when you are following God, it feels so pleasant. It feels so good that I don't have this baggage. I don't have this regret. I don't have these things that just hold me back. But when I'm following God, that my focus is on the eternal rather than what's going on every single day and who I've hurt and who hurt me and all these different things. But when we live within the will of God, that we have a more productive, a better quality of life in our life. So that's the first thing. You got to move the line. The second one is magnify the cost. Magnify the cost. You think about this, and if I give into this temptation, what is the risk? What is the risk? You think about what could go wrong. What if the worst case scenario comes true? You have sex before marriage, you have sex before you're not even dating someone. What's the risk? Someone gets pregnant, STDs. You could lose your loved one's trust. You could lose your reputation. You could lose your job, cost you your marriage, compromise your relationship with your kids. If you think about this, what is the worst thing could happen? Because it typically happens. I remember somebody that was talking to me, and they're like, man, I really want to stop looking at porn. I said, if you keep following this path where you are looking into porn and you are following that, you're going to be at a point where you get to a place where you can't come back from. And he stopped meeting with me after a couple weeks. He wanted to keep doing what he was doing. And eventually he got arrested for molesting someone. And he has to live with that now. I didn't come back and say, see, I told you so. But this is the worst case scenario that a lot of times I didn't plan on getting to this place, but it happened. If you think about that worst case scenario, you think about, what if that comes true? How would I react? So you have to magnify the cost. If I betray the vows, my marriage vows, that'll compromise your integrity. I could lose the trust of Jen. I could lose the respect of my kids, your trust. You could hurt or crush many, many people if I did. I could lose my ministry. This 5 minutes of sin could wreck a lifetime of serving Jesus. That is why we have to figure out first, we got to move that line and stay away from it. And number two, we have to magnify the cost to understand what would happen if I fell into this sin and it gets to the worst scenario. Because the devil's going to attack. But when the devil attacks, we're going to be ready because we've moved the line, we've magnified the cost. So now the last part is you have to plan your escape. You have to plan your escape. We go to Genesis chapter 39 and verse 6. It says, Joseph was a very handsome and well-built young man, and Potiphar's wife soon began to look at him lustfully. Come and sleep with me, she demanded. It would be very easy for Joseph to give in to Potiphar's wife. He was all alone. No one would find out. Besides, she's a good-looking woman. She's young. She made the first move. But he was one of the favorites of Potiphar. He could lose the trust of Potiphar. He would be sinning against God. And at those times, like if that happened, he thinks about it, he magnifies the cost and thinks about it. Okay, if this happens, you know what? A lot of times I'm going to blame God. God, it's all your fault. Why'd you put me in this situation? But you can't use your disappointments to justify your disobedience. Oh, my spouse isn't meeting my needs. I do what I got to do. God, let me be in this spot. I'm just going to, you know what, live in it. I'm going to do it because God, he didn't take me out of this. But Joseph goes up to Potiphar's wife and he says, you know what, no deal. Deal or no deal? We're doing no deal. I'm not doing it. The husband trusts me. Potiphar trusts me. How could I sin against Potiphar, someone who trusts me and I am loyal to, and he is loyal to me? How could I sin against God? And so he resisted. But was there no more temptation? So this keeps going. Day after day, she's hitting on him. Day after day, the devil wears him down. Eventually, you're going to not be able to resist anymore. And you might think Joseph is a strong person, but he wasn't strong. He was ready in the moment. He was smart. He already planned his escape. He was smart enough to pre-plan his escape. So one day, Potiphar's wife came on to him, and he and she grabbed his coat, and he's like, all right, I'm out. Like that SpongeBob quote, all right, I'm going to head out. You do that, and Joseph just like, all right, let's go. Let's do this. Like, I'm out of here. It says in chapter 39, it says, but he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. He left his coat. He left his coat. She pulled it off of him, and he's trying to run away. It's better to have a good name than a good coat. It's better to follow God than have a good coat. Because he already pre-decided. She grabs it. She does something. I'm out of here. I'm running. I'm not doing this. Paul says if you flee from sexual immorality, it talks about porneo, where the word pornography comes from. Porneo, flee, like when you get close to it, run away, like don't look back, don't pass go, don't do any of these things because you're not strong enough to resist it. So run from it. And Paul writes, chapter 10 of 1 Corinthians says, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. You have to pre-decide when the devil attacks. Are you going to be ready? Do you have that escape plan? Because no one plans to mess up. But few plan not to mess up. So I want you to think about this right now. Be honest to yourself. Be honest to your spouse where you're vulnerable. Be honest to your friends. Where can the devil attack me right now? Where am I vulnerable? You have to pre-decide. I'm putting distance between myself and temptation. With Jen, our marriage, I promised God that I would be faithful for the rest of my life. That I made a commitment to God. I made a commitment to Jen. I promised in front of friends and family. I vowed that I would be faithful to her. Things that I've put in my path to not have these situations is I don't stay alone with a woman. Jen and I know each other's phone passwords. Every single password we know. Every single password of each other's we know. Jen and I don't have secret accounts. We don't have others that people don't know about. We don't have those things. We don't hide each other, our phones or computers from each other. Like if someone asks, like, hey, can I see your phone? Like, give it right up because there's not anything that's going to be found. Jen and I have a joint checking account because a lot of times where people have separate accounts, you might think I'm old school, but a lot of times when people have separate accounts, there's a lot of times where temptation can fall in. Oh, they're not going to know about me going out and drinking. They're not going to know about me going and spending money. It's my money. No, you made a pact. You made a vow to God and your spouse that we're going to do this together forever, that our finances are one. The two shall become one flesh. Why would I resist a temptation in the future if I have the power to eliminate it today with the help of the Holy Spirit? There's no temptation that's beyond you. And when you are tempted, he gives us a way out. There's been so many times, every single time I'd say, where I am tempted to sin, where I am tempted to listen to something I don't need to be listening to. When I feel like I am getting close to that point, God puts this still small voice in my head. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't listen to that. You shouldn't partake in this. You shouldn't laugh at that person. You shouldn't watch this. Or sometimes a phone call or a text, or a lot of times in college where Jen and I were hanging out together and we're getting real tempted. A lot of times somebody just randomly call. Or there'd be like a fire drill or something random and it just like shakes you out of it. You're like, this is my chance to turn and flee. The devil's going to attack. You're not as strong as you think, so you have to move the line, magnify the cost, plan your escape. When your values are clear, when I'm going to steer clear of sin, when I'm going to steer clear of not violating the law of God, your decisions are going to be a lot easier. But when we're tired, when we're overwhelmed, when we're angry, when we're emotional, discouraged, depressed, you're going to be more vulnerable than if you felt like you're doing good. You're going to, like, I'm fine. Like, there's not a temptation. Like, I'm having a great day. That's where the devil tries to hit you. He tries to get you while you're down and say, oh, like, see, following God's not great. It feels like this. Jenna and I talk a lot about when we do premarital counseling with couples. We use this term. It's called HALT. It's when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Jenna and I don't start something serious. You bring something up when somebody's already hungry, like Snicker says, when you're not you when you're hungry. There's a reason. There's a reason that Jenna and I try not to talk about things when we're hungry. Jenna and I could also talk about if either one of us are hot or if it feels humid outside. Like, it's not a time to get into a deep conversation about, like, I'm frustrated about this, because you're already frustrated because you're hot. Jenna and I don't like to be hot. But when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, with people and with Satan, he tries to attack you more through those times. So if you write this down, commit it to memory. You write this down, put it in a place where you're going to go a lot. If you look in the mirror, if you drive a lot, put it on your dashboard, not over your speedometer. But you write this down. Decisions won't be based on emotions in the moment, but on the values God placed in our heart. Decisions won't be based on emotions in the moment, but on the values God placed in your heart. It says in the Old Testament that God's law is written on our hearts. We know the difference between right and wrong. We know when we're falling into temptation, like, oh, is this good for me? Is this not good for me? We know that deep down what is good and what is not, because the law was written on our hearts. Decisions won't be based on emotions in the moment, but on the values God placed in your heart.